What if everything you've been told about Lucifer is completely wrong? What if the being painted as ultimate evil is actually humanity's greatest advocate for knowledge and freedom? Today, we're diving deep into one of history's most controversial figures and uncovering truths that might completely flip your understanding of good and evil. I'm not here to promote devil worship or attack anyone's faith. Instead, we're going to explore how different cultures, religions, and philosophical traditions have interpreted this complex figure throughout history. Because when you strip away centuries of propaganda and really examine the stories, you might be shocked at what you discover. The name Lucifer literally means light bringer in Latin. Think about that for a moment. The being we've been taught to fear most actually has a name that means bringer of light. That's not a coincidence. In Roman mythology, Lucifer was the morning star, the planet Venus as it appeared before dawn, heralding the arrival of a new day. Beautiful, bright, and associated with illumination and awakening. But here's where things get really interesting. The modern Christian conception of Lucifer as Satan is actually a relatively recent development in religious history. Early Christians didn't necessarily equate the morning star with the devil. That connection was largely made through interpretations of specific biblical passages, particularly in Isaiah and Ezekiel, which many scholars now believe were originally referring to earthly kings, not supernatural beings. Let's talk about the most famous Lucifer story of all time, the rebellion in heaven. According to this narrative, Lucifer was God's most beautiful angel who rebelled because he wanted to be equal to God. He was cast out of heaven, along with a third of the angels who followed him. But what if we look at this story from a different angle? What if Lucifer wasn't rebelling out of pride or evil, but out of a genuine desire for freedom and self-determination? What if he saw a system where beings were expected to worship and obey without question, and he said, "No, I want the right to think for myself"? From this perspective, Lucifer becomes less of a villain and more of a revolutionary fighting for intellectual and spiritual independence. This interpretation isn't just modern revisionism. It has deep roots in various philosophical and esoteric traditions. The Gnostics, early Christian sects that were later declared heretical, often viewed the serpent in the Garden of Eden not as a deceiver, but as a liberator who opened humanity's eyes to knowledge and consciousness. Think about the Garden of Eden story for a moment. God tells Adam and Eve they can eat from every tree in the garden except one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He warns them that if they eat from it, they will surely die. But the serpent, often identified with Lucifer, tells them they won't die, but their eyes will be open and they'll become like God, knowing good and evil. Who was telling the truth? When Adam and Eve ate the fruit, they didn't drop dead. They gained consciousness, instead became self-aware and developed moral reasoning. They could suddenly distinguish between right and wrong. The serpent was technically correct. So was this temptation or was this enlightenment? From one perspective, the serpent gave humanity the greatest gift possible: consciousness, free will, and the ability to think critically about moral choices. Without this knowledge, humans would have remained in a state of innocent ignorance, unable to make truly moral decisions because they couldn't distinguish between good and evil. This is why many philosophers and freethinkers throughout history have seen Lucifer as a symbol of human reason triumphing over blind obedience. The Romantic poets like Lord Byron and Percy Shelley wrote extensively about this theme. To them, Lucifer represented the human spirit refusing to accept limitations on knowledge and experience. Consider John Milton's Paradise Lost, one of the greatest epic poems in English literature. While Milton was a devout Christian, his portrayal of Satan is so compelling and sympathetic that many readers find themselves rooting for the rebel angel. Milton's Satan delivers some of the most powerful speeches about freedom and self-determination in all of literature. The famous line, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven," isn't just about pride. It's about the fundamental human desire for autonomy and self-governance. It's about refusing to accept a system where your only choice is submission, even if that system offers comfort and security. This theme resonates throughout human history. Every revolution, every fight for civil rights, every scientific breakthrough that challenged religious orthodoxy, every philosophical movement that questioned authority can be seen through this lens. The scientists who defied the church to prove the earth revolved around the sun, the philosophers who argued for individual rights against divine right of kings, the activists who fought against slavery and oppression, they were all, in a sense, following in Lucifer's footsteps. But let's dig deeper into the symbolism. Light has always represented knowledge, wisdom, and enlightenment in human cultures. Darkness represents ignorance, superstition, and blind faith. So when Lucifer is called the Lightbringer, he becomes a symbol of education, triumphing over ignorance, reason over superstition, and critical thinking over mindless acceptance. This is why totalitarian regimes throughout history have always been afraid of education and free thought. They know that once people start thinking for themselves, questioning authority becomes inevitable. The light of knowledge is dangerous to those who depend on keeping others in darkness. In many esoteric traditions, Lucifer isn't seen as evil at all, but as a necessary force for human evolution. Without the challenge, without the questioning, without the rebellion against stagnation, humanity would never grow or progress. Comfort and absolute obedience might feel safe, but they lead to spiritual and intellectual death. The ancient Greeks had a similar figure in Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity. He was punished eternally for this act, chained to a rock while an eagle ate his liver every day for eternity. But Prometheus is universally seen as a hero, not a villain. He gave humans the tools they needed to build civilization, to create art and science and philosophy. The parallel is striking. Both figures defied divine authority to benefit humanity. Both were severely punished for their actions, and both can be seen as symbols of the price we pay for knowledge and progress. The only difference is cultural context and religious interpretation. In many ways, the Lucifer story reflects humanity's complex relationship with knowledge itself. Knowledge brings power, but it also brings responsibility. Ignorance might be bliss, but it's also helplessness. Once you know something, you can't unknow it. Once you taste freedom, submission becomes intolerable. This is what makes the Lucifer symbol so powerful and enduring. It speaks to something deep in the human psyche, our simultaneous desire for security and freedom, our need to push boundaries even when it's dangerous, our compulsion to seek truth even when it's uncomfortable. Throughout history, those in power have always had reasons to paint challengers as evil. It's much easier to maintain authority if you can convince people that questioning that authority is literally satanic. By making Lucifer into the ultimate villain, certain religious and political systems created a powerful tool for controlling dissent. Think about how often revolutionary ideas have been labeled as satanic or evil. Galileo's astronomy, Darwin's evolution, even basic human rights movements have all been attacked as demonic at various times. This isn't coincidence. It's a pattern of using fear to suppress knowledge and progress. But here's something fascinating about human nature. The more something is forbidden, the more attractive it becomes. The more authority tries to suppress an idea, the more people want to explore it. This psychological principle, known as reactance theory, suggests that attempts to limit freedom actually increase the desire for that freedom. So by making Lucifer into the ultimate rebel, religious authorities may have inadvertently created one of the most compelling symbols of human independence in history. The harder they pushed the narrative of absolute evil, the more attractive the alternative interpretation became. This doesn't mean we should worship Lucifer or embrace actual evil. That's not what this is about. What we're exploring is how symbols and stories shape our understanding of fundamental human values like freedom, knowledge, and the right to question authority. The Lucifer archetype appears in cultures around the world under different names and forms. The Hindu tradition has figures like Ravana, the learned demon king who challenged the gods. Norse mythology has Loki, the trickster god who brings both chaos and necessary change. These figures serve similar psychological and cultural functions. They represent the part of human nature that refuses to accept limitations, that pushes boundaries. They're reminders that progress often requires someone to be willing to break the rules and face the consequences. In modern psychology, this archetype is often associated with individuation, the process of becoming a fully realized individual rather than just a product of social conditioning. Carl Jung wrote extensively about how confronting our shadow selves that asks difficult questions, including those parts of us that authority figures tell us are evil, is essential for psychological wholeness. This is why Lucifer remains such a powerful symbol in art, literature, and popular culture. From heavy metal music to Hollywood movies, from philosophical texts to graphic novels, the figure continues to represent represent rebellion against oppressive authority and the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. But we should be careful not to romanticize rebellion for its own sake. Not all authority is oppressive, and not all rules are unjust. The key is developing the wisdom to know when authority serves a legitimate purpose and when it's simply maintaining power for its own sake. The Lucifer symbol reminds us to maintain that critical thinking faculty, to always ask questions, to never stop learning, to resist the comfortable numbness of blind obedience. But it also reminds us that knowledge comes with responsibility, and freedom requires constant vigilance. As we wrap up this exploration, I want to be clear about something. This isn't an attack on religion or faith. Many deeply religious people throughout history have been among the greatest champions of knowledge, education, and human rights. The issue isn't faith itself, but any system that demands we stop thinking, stop questioning, and stop growing as human beings. Whether you see Lucifer as literal evil, symbolic rebellion, or metaphorical enlightenment depends on your own beliefs and experiences. But hopefully, this discussion has shown you that there are multiple ways to interpret even the most fundamental stories of our culture. The most important thing is that you're thinking for yourself, that you're willing to examine different perspectives, question assumptions, and form your own conclusions based on evidence and reasoning. That's the real light that the Lightbringer represents, the illumination that comes from an active, questioning mind. What's your take on all this? Do you see Lucifer as ultimate evil, symbolic rebel, or something else entirely? The conversation doesn't end here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Whatever your perspective, keep questioning, keep learning, and never let anyone convince you that thinking for yourself is a sin. Remember, the most dangerous person to any oppressive system is someone who thinks for themselves. So keep that light burning bright. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore another controversial topic that challenges everything you thought you knew.